Welcome back viewers to this NPTEL course on ESD, Education for Sustainable Development. So, in the last class we are discussing about sustainable happiness, the ways and means of being happy and how can we adopt a sustainable lifestyle, consumption, production, etc., and how can we also build up the positive characteristics like resilience and optimism, resilience. And so, today we will discuss about the mindfulness, what does it mean, how can we achieve this mindfulness habits and practices to help us to make us and make our community more happy, more sustainable in order to achieve the sustainable happiness. So, now let us start with the sustainable happiness and the mindfulness activity for the sustainable happiness. So, subjective well-being, as you can see, own satisfaction, individual, every individual is different. So, we have the individual variation is individual difference is a variable. So, how I will be happy, how I am feeling, how I am satisfied, how do I explain my satisfaction, life satisfaction, it will be definitely different from yours. Interpretation of your subjective experience, subjective well-being. So, all of us we are different. So, all of us, as because all of us we are different. So, how we feel on the day to day basis, our interpretation will be definitely different from others. Similarly, what we think about our lives, that is also another dimension. Similarly, having a worthwhile life, whether we are having a purposeful and meaningful life or not. So, these three components taken together, how do we feel on day to day basis, how do we think, what we think about our own life, and how whether we are having a worthwhile life or not, or any purpose or meaningful life or not. This taking together, these are the three domains of main domains of subjective well-being, which defines individuals subjective well-being and happiness. Then when we talk about the happiness at workplace, definitely it is again both the combination of our personality traits, individual professionals personality traits, attributes, and the n number of factors in the workplace, starting from the work culture to organizational responsibilities, the citizenship, all facilities, everything A to Z. So, for happiness, how happiness at work can be defined? First thing is the personality pattern of the individuals, employees, then the social connection, the social networks, rapport, bonding they are having with their colleagues and the co-workers, and whether they are being given autonomy and freedom to take the decision or not. That means whether they have the autonomy and freedom, that means to take the decisions in the sense that gives a kind of a sense of worthiness. Yes, I am independent, I have the power and to take the decision. So, they consider themselves very important, and whatever they contribute, they think that their contribution also significantly improves the organizations or help them in achieving the organizational goals. Financial security, of course, the job security, financial security, that is important aspect of our life. Then scope for innovation and creativity. So, you can say in the workplace when we are working with the higher knowledge, we also need a kind of opportunity to enhance our lifelong learning, our skills and competencies, because all of us we have our personal ambitions and goals also, so related to our career, our skills and competencies. So, whether we are getting that opportunity or not, if the workplace nowadays most of the organizations, they are providing the scope and opportunity and facilities and resources for innovation and creativity. They not just in terms of financial benefits, but good infrastructures, labs, times, privileges, all kinds of things. So, how to be because of bringing the creativity and innovation among the employees and the workers means the organization is moving towards becoming a creative organization, creative or innovative organization. So, that gives a kind of enhances its brand name. So, creativity and innovation, you can say it is a kind of brand symbol of. So, how innovative, creative and the organization is, and what are the innovative and innovation and creativity facilitating principles they are adopting, they are practicing for promoting innovation and creativity now in their workplace, and as well as that also gives a kind of opportunity to the employees and the workers to explore themselves, to learn new skills and competencies, to professionally grow themselves, professionally develop themselves, nurture themselves, and you can say that also gives a kind of satisfaction. So, similarly, in the workplace also nowadays the organizations they are saying that we are the diversity friendly. Diversity also bring how the diversity friendly organizations are, how they are reputed, because they claim themselves to be, you know, global brand, global company. So, similarly diversity itself, homogeneity, heterogeneity and diversity itself is a very positive concept, in the sense that because all of us across the globe, we are having different culture, different knowledge, different experience, all kinds of things. When we blend together, so definitely it is going to benefit us. So, organizations, they try to not just welcome the diversity, they also try to perfectly blend it, manage it, leverage it, so that their ultimate outcome, the organizational output will be very productive and of universal usage, and of high quality, branded, and all kinds of, it is more, you know, user friendly, towards user friendly for all their global customers. So, acceptance and empathy, yes, the emotional climate of the organization's work environment, the emotional climate, how compassion, how, you know, caring, how sharing, how democratic. So, all these things are, you know, emotional climate of the organization, including the leadership style. These are also important factors. So, challenges and diversity of the task, not just diversity in terms of, you know, staffing and recruitment and the employees, but also diversity of in terms of task, jobs. That means now one type of doing one type of job regularly, it creates a monotony and boredom. So, how they employees are getting the opportunity to get exposed to the new types of task, diversity of task, and they learn new skills and competency, that is also factor. And ultimately the work life balance, that is, the personally the person is happy, and as well as the professionally he is also very happy, and he is also happy in the sense that he is also getting the opportunity for his career development, his financial security, his you know, need gratification, that is academic need, achievement need, social status need, esteem need. So, that is ultimately. So, these work life balance. So, these are the important factors, that determines the happiness at work. Now, sustainable happiness, therefore, sustainable happiness can be defined as human flourishing, human growth and flourishing, plus ecological flourishing. So, sustainable well-being challenge activities are, yes, social, these are the important factors that determines the sustainable happiness. One is the social connections, connectivity, relationship, mindfulness, lifelong learning, helping others, positive engagement, the physical activities, that is the positive engagement. So, these are the factors we will be discussing now. So, pedagogy and practice of sustainable happiness, how sustainable happiness can be learned, can be taught, can be practiced. So, these are the some of the pedagogical tools. Critical reflection, that means having the that means all of us, we should adopt a kind of habit of reflective thinking in the sense that whatever we do, we think, we perform, we need to reflect and evaluate our own performance, so objectively, so that is called the critical reflection. Reflective thinking should be a practice, it is a daily practice, a habit of our learning behavior, through which we critically evaluate our every bit of learning, performance and behavior critically, objectively, so that whenever we reflect on our own performance and behavior, we get to know about the lapses, the weaknesses, and the gaps, etc., and we try to again try to improvise ourselves through more maybe effort, changing strategies, or maybe more developing more better study habits, better skills, etc. So, critical reflection, whatever we do, we must critically reflect and evaluate these things and reflect upon our performance and learning process, that is critical reflection. Another is transformative learning, how to introduce transformative learning, which can bring 360-degree transformation, not just in our thinking, in our feeling, in our emotions, whatever, in our behavior, practice, and the contextual factors. So, sustainability is equal to, you can say, bringing that transformation, complete transformation, not just in our mind, in our thought process, but in our action, in our behavior and whole situation. So, transformative learning primarily aims towards achieving that 360-degree positive transformation changes in any organization, in behavior, in environment, etc. Similarly, immersive learning, deep learning, experiential learning, these are also some of the pedagogical strategies. Immersive learning, that means getting into the depth of any kind of learning situation, being immersed, completely immersed, being passionate about particular learning component or environment. Deep learning also taking up the challenges, new challenges of the societies and the environment, and taking into as a serious problem how we should work upon at the deep in-depth level by using the technology or whatever any other strategic method to find the solution. Experiential learning, when we experience, when we ourselves get involved in the reality, in the practical situation, and learn some of the very good tips and nuances of the environmental problems, that is the experiential learning. So, these are the pedagogical inputs. So, deep contemplation. Contemplation is deep thought, deep deep thinking about our performance, our overall performance, behavior, strategies, every in and out of that is the deep contemplation. So, these are the pedagogy and practice of sustainable happiness. So, sustainable happiness skills is mindfulness, how to develop this mindfulness skilling, that is mindfulness when one is aware of one's current thoughts, feelings and surroundings without judging oneself. Now, right now if we are mindful learning, mindful study, that means you have to be present right now without judging our present, without judging ourself, without judging the things. We have to be involved, immersed, engaged in the present, here and now, ignoring all other factors. So, human connection, relationship, strong bonding relationship is also these are the key tools for the happiness. The people who are having a very good strong social network, social network does not mean this social networking, online social networking side, but the human bonding relationship, strong relationship with the members, physical actual relationship. So, they are supposed to be very happy. So, happy human connections, gratitude, yes. Gratitude is a very good positive strength, character strength. That means when we that means for small things, whatever we get from planet Earth to from the society, from the people, from our employer, whatever small support or help that we receive, and in exchange of it, when we we express our gratitude, thankfulness to that person, that also gives a kind of pleasure. So, pleasure to both the caregiver as well as the caretaker. So, this kind of attitude is again it is a thankful attitude, it is a kind of it is a kind of privilege that we get, and we acknowledge it and we appreciate these kind of sources of happiness and the goodness, and that acknowledgement, that appreciation also gives the a kind of immense happiness. So, positive outlook, for being optimistic, being hopeful, being positive, being that means that positive outlook also helps us in motivating others, and also you also saving others from taking or saving others life from those who are experiencing who are on stress. So, that is also saving others or protecting others, or you can say motivating others, and giving the directions and giving the counseling and mentoring others, those who are suffering from some or other kind of unhappiness or the stress factors. Then purpose is definitely the sense of purpose, means it is a sense of meaning that gives us a kind of goal in our life. So, meaningful, purposeful life also brings sustainable happiness, and generosity is the desire or the ability to assist and to be kind enough, to be compassionate enough, to be empathetic enough towards the others. So, these are all the sustainable happiness skills. So, these are the core sustainable competences, you can say anticipatory, systems thinking, normative, these are also sustainability competences also. So, reflective thinking, as you can see, reflective thinking, it has these 4 phases, something that happened, what happened, we need to acknowledge it, and thereafter how it happened, what now, then what we should do next, what we should do next or plan next, and take the decision and implement it. So, you can say first stage in the reflective thinking is the planning, that is something that has happened, an event idea, that is planning. Then what happened actually, we have to deeply analyze it, then we have to study it properly, what does this mean, examine it, analyze it, evaluate it, then thereafter we reflecting on this whole learning, then we have to take an action plan, design an action plan and implement it. So, a reflection on the learning and then act upon it. Okay. So, then role of the reflective thinking for developing sustainability happiness. So, the Gibbs researcher, he has given this reflective thinking model, starting from description to feeling, then evaluation, then analysis, conclusion, then action plan. These are the different stages of our thought process. How do we analyze a particular situation, starting from its description, narration to the next phases. How do we feel, evaluate, analyze, then conclude something, then on the basis of that then we further develop the action plan to implement it. Okay. So, the major intellectual transition between childhood and adulthood, how we in our growth and development process also this reflective thinking, it provides a skill or mental process during learning. It helps to shape our own thoughts and process. So, in this process, like when we develop our cognition, or in the process of cognitive thought and cognitive processes, when we learn, not just learn about our own ability, efficiency and new knowledge and the skills, but also when we reflect on our own cognition, own study behavior, own learning, that gives a kind of idea of our own strengths and weaknesses. That is called metacognition. Metacognition is knowing about your own cognition or cognition of cognition. As in the computer science we say the metadata. So, data are being saved, but the logistic or how these the data about the data is called the metadata. Similarly, cognition of our own cognition thought process is called the metacognition. So, this reflective thinking also gradually enriches our thought process and takes us towards the metacognition. That means, we can better understand our own process, learning, difficulties, strengths, weaknesses, and there is a clear clarity in our thought process. That means, we know what we can do, what we cannot do, and how to improve our performances. So, that kind of clear knowledge and ability and the skill about our own, that means our own knowledge, our aptitude, our ability and competence. So, then it will help us in taking the right decision, whether I will be suitable for technical job or for taking up this responsibility or in financial transaction or this business process or this entrepreneur. So, whether I will be competent or able enough to do this or take this venture into my professional world. So, that decision will be given, or our metacognition, our competence and skill can enable us in taking that decision. So, reflective thinking also helps learners to develop higher order thinking. Yes, highest level of thinking is creativity. So, below that there is a critical thinking. Unless and until we critically evaluate something, how can we create the new things, or how can we innovate? So, all these are reflective thinking helps us in developing higher order thinking. Also, it helps us in building sustainable citizens, because we can evaluate, criticize, reflect upon our own behavior. So, when we talk about developing sustainable behavior, sustainable consumption and lifestyle, that means we need to reflect on our own habits, we need to reflect on our own behavior, our own mindset, thought processes, own habits. So, that also definitely will enable us, will help us in becoming more sustainable and more sustainable citizen, and can help us in building a sustainable society. So, engage constructively and responsibly in sustainable problem solving activity, improving the self awareness, comparative logical approach. So, these are some of the various methods of teaching reflective thinking. Yes, for read, recite, record, reflect, respond, relate, reasoning, reconstruction. These are some of the practices through which we can strengthen our reflective learning. See, similarly, another important component you can say character strength is resilience. Resilience means to get back to the normalcy irrespective of facing any kind of hurdle or disaster, etc. So, resilience is the ability of a system to absorb all the disturbances, problems, etc. And its basic functions, and to come back to the normalcy. Like after this, for example, after this pandemic, or after a cyclone, after a natural disaster, when even though we have suffered a lot, even though we have very stressful experience, we have had the very stressful experience, we are traumatized, etc., but again we are resilient enough to come back to this normalcy. Okay. So, that means that is called, the resilience is very important. So, initial disturbance is there, but the system is there, then desired output is there. So, how quickly can we come back to the normalcy? Then again we can not only recover it, but also we progress in it. So, degree of self organization of the system, ability to build increase the capacity of learning and adaptation. So, after this recurring natural disaster also, we have developed a new discipline of disaster management, risk management discipline. So, that is the outcome of our regular, that means number of experiences, bitter experiences, traumatic experience because of natural disaster or man-made disaster. So, we developed a new platform, better preparedness, better equipment, infrastructure to deal with the any kind of future disaster that may happen. So, that makes us made us more sustainable. So, resilience is also is an aptitude, is a skill, it is a behavioral pattern through which also which makes us more sustainable, because we develop the capacity to fight back every odd situation. So, resilience, you can say it is in direct relation with the sustainable competencies. These are some of the sustainable competencies that we have been discussing again and again. Systems thinking, having systems thinking competency, that is having a holistic vision, having a harmonious vision, etc. And anticipatory, that means competency that we can predict, we can make the assumptions. So, so that also make the assumptions and get prepared for it, that is the proactiveness. Similarly, collaboration competency, we can collaborate with others and develop our network, that will strengthen our performance and behavior. Self awareness competency, everybody, all of us, we need to reflect on our own behavior and develop the self awareness competency about our pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses, and how can we enhance, how can we learn new skills and competencies. So, resilience is another important factor of sustainability and sustainable happiness. These are some of the three facets of resilience. Resilience with regard to ecological resilience, socio-ecological resilience, engineering resilience. These are the descriptions, the characteristics. As you can see, socio-ecological resilience, you can say interplay with disturbance and recognition, sustaining and developing. This is the model given by Folk 2006. Focus on engineering resilience is focus on recovery and constancy. Ecological resistance is the robustness and persistence, and focus in socio-ecological resilience is adaptive capacity, transformability, and the learning motivation, etc. And the context is that context in case of things, vicinity of the stable equilibrium, multiple equilibria, stability landscapes, integrated system, feedback, and cross scale dynamic interactions. So, now take for the example of I think in the last class also we have discussed about this Japan, how Japan is very high in the sustainability index, because not that their culture, but their education system and the people over the generation, you can say since Second World War II. So, they have become so resilient, and this resilience component and sustainability, how efficiently they have embedded in their culture, in their practice, in their habits, in their learning, in their system, that so irrespective of the frequent very often the frequent happenings of this natural disaster like tsunami or earthquake, etc., and being victimized because of this regular natural disaster. Even then they are prompt enough, quick enough, resilient enough to get back to the normalcy, and they have developed such a kind of systems, not just in their human behavior, in their attitude, but also in technology also. They have leveraged the technology, developed their own technology in building and construction, infrastructure, everything, not just in terms of technology and education, but also in terms of culture and habits. So, the children from the very beginning, they have been taught to be how to be resilient in every odd situation, in every awkward context, in every awkward event. So, they have been taught. So, the children are being reared up, are being brought up in this embedding this quality or adopting this nature of a habit of being resilient and sustainable. So, it is not a matter of 1 day or 2 day or over the few years, but it is a generation. It is the result of their generational effort of being resilient and sustainable. So, in Asian countries, you can say that Japan is the best example, and it is well ahead in sustainability, and it is also contributing, giving the funds towards the sustainable goals and objectives across the world. So, how to improve the resilience? These are some of the tips, some of the key points. You can say developing a social networks, being optimizing. Social networks does not mean only your Facebook and LinkedIn, etc., but also real network, social relationship and network and the bonding. Being optimizing means being positive, having the positive outlook, always looking at the bright side of the thing. So, and analyzing it positively, that is good, but false optimism. That false optimism means superficial, being superficial in not being able to actually identify the real problems or the gaps and to overcome it and the strategies to overcome it, but false optimism is of no use. So, being build optimism and positive outlook in getting the things done, in motivating others, practicing self care, self awareness, self loving, self care, accepting our own self, by establishing a bond with our inner self. So, finding a sense of purpose and meaning of goal in life. It may be your career goal, it may be your professional goal and family goal, it's okay, but beyond that, what is the more meaningful? Beyond that, what is next? Embrace the change. Yes, that means we should be more adaptive towards the change. How the change is inevitable, but how adaptable we are towards the change, how how quickly positively we accept the change. Having a broader perspective of life, developing goals and problem solving skills, etc. These are some of the clippings, how having the vision, mission and values. These are the purposeful, meaningful relationship, then this is the positive outlook, this is being happy, this is being taking care of the self growth, then is self care through different practices, and this is how we are developing our cognitive and emotional skills, competencies, analyzing a problem, getting the solution and moving towards the success. So, these are some of the practices, some of the tips through which we can improve our resilience. So, again now mindfulness is again another very much effective cognitive tool. Mindfulness is very efficient cognitive tool. What is that mindfulness? Being present and attentive purposefully and non-judgmentally in the mind. So, being present here at now. Like if I am mindful means I have to focus on this, what is happening, even if it is happening within within me, my inner self or in the environment, in the class, what is that? Being very attentive to the present without judging it, evaluating it. So, to be present here and now, to be present and attentive here and now, what is happening, what is ongoing, that is the mindfulness. So, its focus is to accept and allow what is going on in the present without an immediate pressure to change it. Just feel it, just attain it, just listen to it. Okay. So, its focus to accept, to allow, to be present without judging it. Okay. So, this is a kind of system that reflecting how this reflective thinking moves on from the input to output. Then yes, disturbances as the social disturbance, external disturbance, we have to build the resilience, and resilience can also strengthen our system. Then again a reflective thinking from the feedback that we receive, and from reflective thinking, through the reflecting thinking, then we move towards the output. This is just framework of reflective thinking and analysis. Yes, of course, mindfulness is a very important cognitive tool. So, these are some of the clippings. As you can see, mindfulness engages practitioner in acclimating the present moments of experiences, search of mindfulness through yoga, through different yoga, through deep breathing, different kinds of spiritual practices also gives us a mindfulness. Similarly, yoga, pranayam, breath work, meditation, these are things also helps us in developing the power of mindfulness, our mindfulness habits. So, mindfulness, you can say it is the stages are here, like practice begins with the pranayam, you can say thereafter you can do, say stage 2 is continue with the yoga practices, emphasizing on the controlled breathing and postures. Then third stage can be sitting, lying, standing, relaxation positions, and the fourth stage can be while listening to some relaxing music, that means the rhythm, and then beginning the meditation for 10-15 minutes or so. So, this is the whole sequence of the cycle of the mindfulness learning. So, the feedback. So, how feedback is that how has the mindfulness practice influenced the way we have interacted with others. So, we have to reflect on our own behavior. Yes, we have been practicing it for last few days or months, etc. Then we need to reflect on our own behavior, that is we have to get the feedback. So, why do we use them at the particular time of day? These are some of the questions we need to ask ourselves. What changes have you noticed in our life and implementing mindfulness practices? How do you deal with the conflict and anxiety? How do you elaborate a general feeling of your experience from the practice? So, these are some of the questions we need to ask ourselves to analyze, to evaluate how far we have been successful in learning the mindfulness practices. So, this is also a plan, a strategic plan developed by the Pan-Canadian project, that is walking to cycling, like it is a kind of planning. The key stakeholders here including the school administrator, representative, musical staff, etc. they started this project. So, the data, that means more than 5,000 baseline family surveys provided the data on travel modes from the cycle to the group, that means the community, towards the community. So, how these travel modes, the barriers to active travel and sustainable happiness, that from individual journey towards the collaborative journey, how they have moved on, how happiness they have achieved, how much happiness they have achieved. So, data collection and meetings will with all the relevant stakeholders who influence or have an interest in the school level or school travel planning. So, in our life or in our school days also we used to go for the study tour, school picnic, and these things are for the for developing that community community well-being, community feeling of togetherness. So, this is just a small project, Canadian PAN project. So, that every educational institution, schools can also implement also. So, mindfulness, again these are the results, even if we can try for 15 minutes a day mindful practice, it is also found to be very very positive, enhances our self confidence, self happiness, self complacency, and also it also created healthier development, healthier environment. So, these are the researchers, they have given some of the findings. So, this so how these things can be very much reflective, can be very much helpful in not just enabling us in getting the happiness and more satisfied life, but also enhancing our competencies and learning abilities as well. So, how this positive positive habits of mind to promote the happiness. How can we develop the positive habits of mind to promote happiness? These habits of mind, what is like, for example, we before learning, before preparing for our final examination, we also make a plan of plan of a timetable kind sort of thing. So, these are some of the tips that we can say: make a schedule, practice empathy, then being non-judgmental, objective, evaluative, develop rational thinking, rational thinking, and then practice compassion, empathy, compassion, helping, caring nature, helping out others. So, express your gratitude to self and others, like for every time, we must from time to time we must offer our gratitude, express our gratitude to not just God, to sun or the natural resources, our environment, our parents, our elders, etc. So, this kind of attitude, a feeling of we are grateful because we are being helped, we are being helped and by the others, be it planet Earth or our parents or our teachers or our community people, or you can say or from the solar energy that we are being given. We should be thankful to every resource, every factor that evolves in and around our life, that helps us in our upbringing, in our growth and development. So, being in the present and moment, this is the mindfulness, being in the present and moment, then make a schedule. So, all these are the few steps of developing a positive mindset, positive habits of mind to promote happiness. Then these habits of mind, these are the tips, these are the some of the significant factors. These 6 are the important key factors. So, habit of minds can contribute towards the intentional activities, purposeful and meaningful activities that are most influential for happiness. As you can see, listening with understanding and empathy, thinking flexibly, being more open minded, accepting others' views, taking into consideration others' perspectives, thinking interdependently, thinking and communicating with clarity and precision, thinking about own thinking, that is your originality, helping out the nature, helping others. These are some of the some of the habits of mind practices towards the happiness. And these are the great benefits of the mindfulness that we have achieved, we could achieve. Being mindful of our thoughts and emotions promotes well-being. Being mindful, it can also help us in our working memory. Working memory is that our present memory, admins, you can say it's a kind of platform, that's a working platform. Right now we are working on certain problems. If you are working on a particular project or topic or thesis or work, whatever. So, how attentive, how focused we are, and we are focusing on that unless and until we complete that project. So, working memory, you can say it's a working platform, or the task, that is completing the task mindfully, whatever we have taken up or whatever project or task that is there in at our hand in the moment, the present moment. So, being mindful to improve our working memory. If you become mindful, definitely it helps our working memory, that is retaining, enhancing and giving becoming more attentive in getting the solution of a problem that is we are dealing with at the moment. So, mindfulness also acts as the buffer against the depressive systems and associated with discrimination. If we are stressed because of any kind of discrimination being made by somebody or any kind of depressive remarks, criticism given by others, so being mindful also we can overcome all these things. So, it is a kind acts as a buffer. Mindfulness can also help us in make a better use of the strengths, like instead of focusing on our weaknesses, being upset with our weaknesses and shortcomings and the criticism, rather we can overcome it by focusing more on our strengths and positive abilities. So, mindfulness practice can also raise our happiness set point. Mindfulness can help us make us more resilient. Mindfulness also it shrinks the stress and the stress region in the brain, and also being mindful also it in the within the brain, it also releases or facilitates, helps in releasing some of the hormones, that is the positive hormones, like you can say release of dopamine in the brain. This is a positive hormone. So, release of dopamine can also make us happy. So when you are that means we are in a unhappy stage or we are in stress conditions. So, positively consciously being mindful also we can change our mind mechanisms, or we can also make neurochemical reaction of our mind by being positive, being purposeful, being meaningful and mindful. We can also change our attitude and moods also. So, moods also we can take control of our moods, our emotions. So, in this process also practicing mindfulness and this meditation and all kinds of things also can also help us in releasing in changing the brain, the chemical biochemical changes in the mind, in releasing the positive hormones, happy hormones, that is the dopamine. So, it shrinks the stress region automatically. When the more positive hormones or happy hormones will be released, and the stress the region, the locus, the area of stress will be decreased, and so we can overcome all this stressful thinking or stressful experiences. So, now here I am concluding that yes, the union of sustainability, happiness and well-being can transform the individuals, community and the nations and as well as our planet. So, it can accelerate the shifts in attitudes, policies, practices and behavior. Hence, so we can also take up some of the case studies of sustainable communities to investigate the association between sustainable lifestyle and life satisfaction that we have been discussing all through these lectures, the sustainable consumption, production, food security, energy, all kinds of things. Now, I am concluding it here now. So, the whole session of 12-week course of the sustainable education for sustainable development comes to an end here now. So, I hope all of you could enjoy, you can learn many things from these lessons, these lectures, and I am also looking forward to your feedback, positive feedback. And yes, of course, I also welcome you to to share your thoughts, and I can also clarify your doubts through these forums also. I wish you all the best, and I hope the more, that means if you can enjoy, if you can learn, if you can be benefited from this course, then I will think I will take that it's a meaningful experience for me, it would be a meaningful experience for me, or worthy of worth, you can say, worth teaching, worth sharing, worth discussing these relevant topics, not just for ourselves, but for our community, for our country, for our planet. So, thank you very much. Now, I am ending this whole thing. I am looking forward to your comments, to our feedbacks and the queries in the forum. Thank you very much.